It started as a faint odor, just a slight whiff of something unpleasant in the air. At first, I thought it was a dead mouse stuck somewhere in the air vents. The smell would come and go, barely noticeable some days and stronger on others. It wasn't exactly foul at first, more like a musty, earthy scent. I didn't think much of it at the time. Living in an old house has its quirks, and I figured it was just another one of those things you learn to live with. The house itself was nothing special. A small, two-story place on a quiet street just outside the city. I'd moved in about 6 months ago, thrilled to have my own space for the first time. The rent was cheap, and aside from a few creaks in the floors and some peeling wallpaper, it was perfect. At least it had been. About a month into living there, I started to notice the smell more frequently. It became this constant background presence, following me from room to room. Some days it was so faint that I could almost forget it was there. Other days it was strong enough to make me wrinkle my nose and check the trash cans, thinking I'd forgotten to take out some old food or left something to spoil. But no matter how much I cleaned, it persisted. One night, after a particularly long day at work, I collapsed onto the couch, exhausted. I remember lying there, trying to relax, when that smell hit me again. But this time, it was stronger than ever. It wasn't just musty anymore. It was rotten, putrid. It was the kind of smell that gets into the back of your throat, making you gag. I sat up, my stomach churning. It felt like it was coming from the vents, seeping into the room. I stood and walked around the house, following the scent. It seemed stronger in certain rooms, particularly the hallway on the second floor. I pressed my nose to the air vent, and the stench nearly knocked me back. Something was definitely wrong. The next morning, I called an exterminator, convinced there was a dead animal rotting somewhere in the ductwork. They came by, poked around for a bit, but found nothing. No sign of mice, rats, or anything else that could explain the smell. They shrugged, told me it was probably just old pipes or dampness in the walls, and left. But the smell didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. Over the next few weeks, the odor grew unbearable. I couldn't sit in the living room for more than a few minutes without feeling nauseous. I bought air fresheners, lit candles, sprayed disinfectant. Nothing helped. The smell just clung to everything, as if it had soaked into the walls themselves. One night, I woke up gasping for air. The smell had become so thick, so overpowering, that it felt like I was breathing in decay. My throat burned, and my eyes watered. I stumbled out of bed, barely able to keep from retching, and ran downstairs to open a window, desperate for fresh air. As I stood by the window, gulping deep breaths, I noticed something strange. The smell wasn't as strong down here. I looked around, confused, and slowly made my way back upstairs. As I climbed the steps, the stench hit me again, growing stronger with every step. By the time I reached the top, it was unbearable. My head spun, and I had to cover my mouth and nose with my sleeve to keep from vomiting. The smell was coming from the hallway, right where the vent was. I stood there for a moment, staring at the vent, my mind racing. Something was very wrong. I grabbed a screwdriver from the kitchen, marched back upstairs, and unscrewed the vent cover, determined to figure out what was going on. The moment the cover came off, the smell intensified tenfold. It hit me like a wave of death, nearly knocking me off my feet. I gagged, tears streaming down my face, as I held my breath and aimed my flashlight into the duct. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just dust and grime. But then something caught my eye, farther back, deeper into the duct. There was a shape. At first, I thought it was just some debris, maybe an old piece of insulation or a dead animal caught in the pipes. But as I leaned closer, squinting into the dark, I realized it wasn't debris. It was flesh. My heart stopped. I could barely breathe as I reached deeper into the vent, fingers trembling. The texture was soft, cold. It wasn't just flesh. It was skin. I jerked my hand back, horrified. The smell of rot suddenly made sense. My stomach lurched, and I ran to the bathroom, barely making it to the toilet before I vomited. My head spun, my heart racing, as the realization set in. There was a body in my vents. I should have called 911 right then and there, but I couldn't think straight. My mind was a blur of panic and disbelief. I stumbled back to the hallway, flashlight still in hand, and stared at the vent, my body trembling. I didn't know what to do. Should I leave? Should I call someone? But who the hell do you call when you find a human body in your walls? After what felt like hours, I made a decision. I wasn't going to live in a house with a rotting corpse hidden in the walls. I needed to get it out to figure out what the hell was going on. So, against my better judgment, I grabbed a pair of gloves, climbed a chair, and reached into the vent again, pulling the skin toward me. It was cold, stiff, like leather. The smell was so overpowering that I had to breathe through my mouth to keep from throwing up again. Slowly, carefully, I pulled it out inch by inch until the whole thing slid free. It wasn't just a piece of skin. It was an entire human body, or what was left of one. The skin was loose, sagging, as if it had been carefully removed and then stuffed into the vent. There was no muscle, no bone, just skin. Empty, hollow, like a human suit. I dropped it, my body shaking uncontrollably. My mind couldn't process what I was seeing. Who could have done this? Why was it in my house? How long had it been there? As I stood there, staring at the limp, hollow skin in front of me, something even more horrifying dawned on me. It looked familiar. There was a tattoo on the arm, an intricate design of a snake coiling around a dagger. I'd seen that tattoo before. Jim, my neighbor. Jim had the exact same one. Jim, who had gone missing a few months ago. Jim, whose house had been empty for weeks now, his disappearance still unsolved. I backed away, my mind racing. This was Jim's skin, his body. His flesh had been stuffed into my air vent, left to rot. I felt like I was going to be sick again. My legs gave out, and I collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath. How the hell had this happened? How had I been living in this house for months without realizing there was a body rotting in my walls? I had to call the police. I had to get out of here. But as I reached for my phone, I heard something. A sound that chilled me to the bone. It was coming from the vent. A low, rasping breath. Slow, deliberate. Then a voice. "I'm not done." I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. The voice was faint, barely audible over the sound of my own ragged breathing. But it was there. "I'm not done." My blood ran cold. I stumbled to my feet, phone in hand, and ran downstairs, locking the door behind me. My fingers trembled as I dialed 911, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice was calm, steady. I could barely get the words out. There's a body in my house," I stammered, my voice shaking. Someone's been in my walls. Please, you have to send someone. I think they're still here." The operator asked for my address, and I gave it to her, my hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the phone. She assured me that help was on the way, but it didn't make me feel any better. Whoever had put that body in my vent was still here. I could feel it. I pressed my back against the door, trying to steady my breathing. The house was silent now, too silent. The only sound was the pounding of my own heart, echoing in my ears. Minutes passed like hours. I kept my eyes on the stairs, half expecting to see someone creeping down. But nothing happened. No sound, no movement, just silence. Finally, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. As I stood there, waiting for the police to arrive, I heard it again. The voice. I'm not done. It wasn't coming from the walls this time. It was right behind me. I spun around, heart racing, but there was no one there. The room was empty, but the smell was back, stronger than ever. It wasn't coming from the vents anymore. It was coming from me. I looked down, my hands trembling, and realized with horror that the smell of rot was clinging to my skin. It was me. The door burst open, and the police rushed in, guns drawn.